Hello, now today I am, like many drivers, facing the inevitable and going electric. For this is the new Mazda MX-30, the brand's new all-electric mini SUV type thing, and I'm here in delightfully rainy Bedfordshire to give it a bit of a whirl. Now, I'm quite interested by this car. With electric vehicles, there's kind of always that option really. There's two ways of doing it. You can either just electrify an existing model, you know, just put batteries and an electric motor in a standard super mini or SUV, and that is kind of, it doesn't freak people out, it just looks like a normal car, but it's got the electrification. Or you can create something a bit more interesting, use the opportunities that electric vehicles provide to create something a bit more distinctive, and that's what Mazda, in its usual way, has done here. Now the car starts at just over £28,000, which is pretty keen. You get £3,000 off that with your government grant as well, and that's a pretty appealing proposition. We'll talk a bit more about the kind of technical way that Mazda has gone with this car when I get on the road very soon, I hope, because that's quite interesting in itself. But first let's just have a look at the way it looks, and I think it's a really good looking car. It's got this kind of three-tone thing. You can have a contrast roof, side panels and body colour, or you can have it all in one colour, but I think it really works. I think it's quite a cool looking thing, which kind of tallies with Mazda's design language at the moment. It's really on a roll with its design, making some really good looking cars. I mean, as you can see, it's your standard kind of small SUV type thing, but I think they've pulled it off in a really stylish way, and it's got a few little quirks which I like. So you get into it. You've got your standard door here if it lets me in, and then you've got what Mazda calls a freestyle door. It's not suicide door. I don't gone for a slightly more positive description. So is there room back here for a grown-up? Yeah, there is just about. So it works from a functional point of view, kind of harks back to the old RX-8, of course, a very different Mazda from a very different era. So yeah, it's got, you know, it looks cool. It's got some kind of stylish gimmicks that will make it stand out from your regular EVs on the school run and in the supermarket car park. So yeah, I think it wins. It's got some novelty value there. Now, technically, there is some interesting stuff in the way it drives and the way Mazda has gone about all that. So I think I'm going to take this opportunity to get out of the rain and tell you all about that from behind the wheel. Right, so a couple of caveats to get out of the way before I actually tell you what the MX-30 is like to drive. Firstly, apologies for the drowned rat appearance, but you'll appreciate the weather was a bit minging out there, so nothing can be done about that. Also, you will notice a slight mismatch between the interior footage of me driving the car here in the UK and the exterior B-roll, which I may well splice into this video to give you a break from looking at me, which shows the car in sunny Holland, which is where we were supposed to be for the launch of this car, but obviously we are not because of you know what. So that out of the way, let's have a look at what the MX-30 is like. And really here it's the same challenge you have when reviewing any electric car, because you've got to kind of look at two different topics really. You've got to appraise the car in isolation, but then you have to put it into context of electric cars in general and how they fit into the wider world and the dreaded infrastructure. But before we get onto that, let's just have a look at what Mazda has done with the MX-30 and how, in its usual way, it's kind of done things a little bit differently. So let's just have a look at how it compares with some obvious rivals. So the two I've picked to kind of illustrate the points I'm going to make are the Peugeot E2008 and the Renault Zoe. Now, from the outset, the Mazda is cheaper. It's when you factor in the £3,000 government grant, it starts at just over £25,000. Zoe is just over 26, and the Peugeot is 28. Those are starting prices, as I say, with the government grant. The next kind of major comparison you're going to be looking at is the size of the battery, and this is the kind of Mazda's thing that's a bit different. So the Mazda's battery is a 35 kilowatt hour, which is quite a bit smaller than the 50 kilowatt and just over 50 in the Zoe. Now that obviously means, well, a smaller battery means either less performance or less range. The performance in the MX-30 is comparable. It's got 145 horsepower, so in performance terms it's comparable with those two, but the range, official range in this is 120 miles combined. In the Peugeot, it's just shy of 200, and in the Zoe, more like 245. So, real world, if you're looking at a journey of 100 miles or so, you're going to be getting squeaky cheeks in this car, aren't you? The Peugeot, you'd be happier, yeah, maybe 150 miles before you start getting worried. The Zoe, you'd probably be happy doing 200 miles in that car. I have to say I don't have experience of it, but you know, looking at the facts, that would be a kind of starting point. So, the advantage of a smaller battery is that it's quicker to charge, obviously, because it's less batteries fill up. So there's that advantage. If you are having to stop frequently because of the lack of range, then it doesn't take long to charge. But I'm getting on to the infrastructure thing there, which I said I wouldn't talk about at this point. I said I was going to talk about the car. The MX-30 makes a really strong style statement. I said that in the outset, didn't I? It's a good-looking car. Good-looking car on the outside. It's a really good-looking car on the inside. I love this kind of floating console. The materials are really cool. This cork here is a nice reference to Mazda's origins. It started out 100 years ago as a manufacturer of synthetic cork, so that's a nice little reference there. You can get all sorts of nice fabrics and stuff like that on the inside, including a vegan synthetic leather for your full-on EV owner virtue signalling statements there, so that's all cool. It's interesting as well, the last electric car I was driving was the Polestar 2, which is a similar kind of style statement EV, isn't it? A very cool looking car. And I think you could put this Mazda alongside the Polestar and people would think they were equivalent level cars just because the Mazda is such a cool looking thing, when in fact it costs about half as much as the Polestar. So that's impressive, whereas the Peugeot just looks like a standard small SUV, just happens to be electrified. The Zoe is that, you know, it's a sort of generic hatchback again that just happens to be electrified. So neither of them are what you call style statements like the Mazda is. So for the kind of early adopter image of electric cars, I think the MX-30 makes a really strong impression from that perspective. So it's a cool thing, and it drives really nicely as well. And Mazda's got this kind of, they've got shifter paddles here, as you can see, which aren't shifter paddles. They control the amount of regeneration. So on the open road like this, you can go for a more kind of flowy kind of driving experience. And then if you're in stop-start traffic, you just kind of go down through the gears, as it were, and you can effectively drive it on one pedal and obviously get more regen as you do. So in this kind of mid-setting that I'm in now, you've got 5 stages in this mid-setting. It feels really nice. It's got very light steering. It feels light, even though it's actually not. It weighs just under 1,650 kilos, it's about 100 kilos more than that Peugeot, which surprised me actually, because I thought because of that smaller battery it would be lighter, but they have managed to get that essential Jinba Itai horse and rider as one feeling, that you can tick that one off your Mazda bingo card there. It was in the press conference, obviously. Yeah, it's a really, really nice car to drive, and it does have that kind of typical Mazda kind of agility and sense of fun. So I think, you know, a car fan could buy this car and feel totally happy with that perspective. I like this kind of touchscreen thing. It's a nice mix of kind of traditional dials and tech. Spec's good, you get head-up display as standard, all that kind of stuff. So as a product, it's really, really good. I am a Mazda fanboy, I admit it, but I like what they've done. So that's good. Now we get on to what it would be like as an ownership proposition, and that kind of elephant in the room of the range all of a sudden starts making some noise, doesn't it? Because a car with effectively 100 miles range on a good day, fine. If you live in a town, if you only do a short school run, a short commute, if you've got a driveway and you can charge at home overnight, it's not going to be an issue. That's fine, and I would wholeheartedly recommend the MX-30 to you. A bit like the Honda E in that case, isn't it? You know, it doesn't hide the fact that it's built for short distances and celebrates the certain advantages that come from that. For me though, you know, I look at the journeys that I do. I tend to be on the road quite a lot. If I look at a typical journey, pre-lockdown, I would go and see my mum. She lives about 120 miles away. I couldn't do that journey in this car without stopping to recharge. And that puts me at the mercy of the public charging infrastructure. Now, I will get flamed by EV owners who say, oh, it's not that bad. You know, you journalists, you only get the car for a week. It's not an accurate representation of what it's actually like to live with an EV. I understand that, but my personal experiences of driving EVs have been, frankly, a bloody nightmare when you have to depend on that public infrastructure, which you will with a car with such short range. You know, if I was driving to my mum's, I would have to find somewhere to stop and charge up. Motorway service stations usually only have a handful of spaces. Inevitably, most of them will be blocked by a Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV charging up its 20-mile range or whatever it is, or an internal combustion car blocking it. It's not actually that cheap to charge on those chargers either, or you have to go and find another charger somewhere. Inevitably that means spending 5 minutes downloading another app, registering your card to it, finding that it doesn't work, ringing them up, finding that the call centre's shut. My experiences so far of using the public charging infrastructure have not been good, and they have not made the experience of being an electric car an enjoyable one for me. So by putting a small battery in this car, and Mazda makes some good points about the fact that that smaller battery means less CO2 in the production of the car. It means the break even, as they call it, between where the extra CO2 of making an electric car overtakes that of the internal combustion car, so then you start winning on CO2. That comes a lot sooner than it does on cars with bigger batteries. I understand all that, but with that smaller battery, Mazda is in effect forcing you to depend on that public charging infrastructure, which at the moment just isn't there. I know it will get better. I know when you live with a car, you'll get smarter about how you charge and all the rest of it, but your hand is being forced by that small battery if you want to travel more than 100 miles, up to 100 miles. So I really, really like this car. I really like it as a product. I like how it looks. I like what they've done. I like pretty much everything about it. But as a prospective purchase, that would be a deal breaker for me, because if I were to have this car, I would also have to have an internal combustion car as well for longer journeys, which kind of defeats the object and any kind of green credentials you might be hoping for by having an electric car, doesn't it? So, kind of reluctantly, it's the same old thing. I can say the car's brilliant, but the ownership experience at the moment just wouldn't be there for me. Mazda, thankfully, does have an answer, and it's a very Mazda solution. They are eventually going to offer this car with a range extender engine. Not only that, it's going to be a Rotary. So that is really cool. So, you know, for Mazda fans, the return of a Rotary engine is obviously an exciting thing. It's perfectly suited to a range extender application because it just has to sit there at constant revs. The lack of torque that people moaned about in RX-8s and all the rest of it, that won't be an issue because it's not powering the wheels, so you don't suffer from that. Hopefully the emissions and all that will be reduced as well, because the engine will be very small, very light. If it only has to turn a generator, a Rotary engine can be tiny. So that's really exciting. Bad news, it's not on sale yet, and the Mazda guys were a little bit vague as to when it would be. But this car with a range extender would make a lot more sense, and I think I would be a lot more comfortable owning one in that case. So there we go. The MX-30. It is an interesting car, as you would expect Mazda to build. It's an interesting take on going electrified. It won't work for everybody, but if your kind of driving patterns fit within its limitations, then it's a really, really nice thing, and I would wholeheartedly recommend it. For me, I'll be holding on for the Rotary range extender. Thank you very much.